Guys, when the moment for intimacy arrives, you need to be ready. Roman ready. Whether you've been in a relationship for years or you're just getting started, having the confidence that comes from preparation means that you're free to enjoy the moment when the moment comes, even though you are far from ordinary. The truth is, ED is really common. With Roman, you can get a free online evaluation and ongoing care for erectile dysfunction, all from the comfort and privacy of your home. A U.S. licensed healthcare professional will work with you to find the best treatment plan. If medication is appropriate, it ships to you free with 2-day shipping. The whole process is straightforward, convenient, and discreet. Getting started is simple. Go to GetRoman.com/Chael. Do it today. If you're prescribed, you will get $15 off your first month of ED treatment. Make sure you're ready and you have the confidence and control this summer. Roman ready. I feel as though I've made this piece, a very similar piece, a very similar topic, countless times. But Mike Tyson just made a comment as it comes to Conor McGregor. He's just talking about how Conor comes back. And Mike was laying out the best path. Said that Conor should get a few fights in. I think he said 3. I think he said a few. Easy fights. Build his confidence. Build that confidence. Get that step back. Get used to it. Work those combos. However you want to say it. The ring rut. However you want to say it. And then on the 4th time, after he gets those 3 wins, after he gets that experience, after he gets better, on the 4th one, that's the big one. If he's going to do a championship match, make it that match. He laid that out. Now, other guys have said something similar. Joe Rogan went a little less far. He didn't make it 3 matches. He just said his next 1. I have come in and told you guys the same thing. That the problem that Conor ran into, his second fight, but his first one back against Dustin Poirier. So fight 2 with Dustin Poirier, but the first one of their modern era series. The problem that Conor ran into wasn't a lack of preparation. And it wasn't that Dustin was so much better. It was that Conor had been out for a period of time. If there was any mistake or any underserving of McGregor that we, the community, did in 2020, it's that when he came back on January 19th and fought Cowboy Cerrone in a fight that was at 40 seconds, guys, or was it even 20 seconds? I think it was 40 seconds and he landed 20 punches. Am I close on those numbers? We didn't put him back in there. I mean, you almost have to take that Cowboy experience out. There's a lot of positives that came with the training camp. He went through the licensing. He went through the weigh-in. He did the flight. He slept in the hotel. He did the warm-up. He wrapped the hands. I mean, he had that experience, which is very important. But then you got the in-ring, which is even more important, and that almost didn't happen. That almost did. 40 seconds, it just almost didn't happen. Well, you take that off the board, my God, we sit him for a whole nother year, and then we throw him in a main event on a different continent in the middle of a pandemic against a straight-up hammer and Dustin Poirier. It's pretty obvious in hindsight. Of course Poirier beat him. Pretty obvious in hindsight. So I came to the same conclusion that Mike and Joe Rogan did, which is if Conor's next fight, if it could be, but I will just go further. And it's very interesting that Mike said this. Very interesting that Mike Tyson said 3 fights. 3 building fights and then go and do the big one. It's interesting to me because Mike is speaking from Mike's experience. You could do that in boxing. Boxing is the dirtiest sport in the world, but they will bring in a guy off a bar stool and put a pair of gloves on him. There was a story, they did a mega event a number of years ago, and they brought in a homeless man who had never boxed. It's a true story, and I'm not looking to tease the guy because he was down on his luck. I'm just, boxing will do things like this. So if Mike was in Conor's shoes, that's all Mike's doing. He's been a good human being, following the basic rule. Put myself in someone else's shoes, what would I do? That's what Mike would have done. And if he was in the sport of boxing, that's what he could do. That's exactly how they will. We don't do that in MMA. There's nobody within the Ultimate Fighting Championship that would fit that criteria. Are there guys that are less difficult? Sure there are. Is there anyone that's an easy fight? My God, of course not. Let alone that's going to be in a marquee spot, a main event on a pay-per-view against Conor McGregor. No, no, and no. It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen. I don't know that you're going to get Conor 3 more times. I mean, that's a whole nother part to it. If you think, well, no, we can rig the deck just a little bit. We can manipulate this and we can bring in someone there. You can. But I don't know that Conor's ever going to fall for it because you're also speaking to Conor's mindset. Does Conor agree with anything that I just said? Does Conor agree that what bit him in the ass against Dustin Poirier in that return fight was just the layoff? Does he even agree with that? Okay, great. Let's say that we got him, that he does. Now you're coming to another problem, which is that Conor's down in the dumps right now. That Conor is not a positive, he's not upbeat, he doesn't have confidence. That's the word. He doesn't have confidence. Well, how do you know? You have no idea what his level of confidence is. You don't know what he's thinking. You don't know what his experience from that fight with Dustin Poirier is. I had a fight one time, and it was the least I performed ever in terms of bringing your skills or bringing competitiveness, or just just not having it that night, and you're caught and you're on live TV. It's the nut of my whole career. Oh my goodness. Blocked it from my memory. Like, didn't even happen. Didn't even happen. Did not go out there. But I had this event, and it did happen. At the end of the night, Joe Rogan, I remember what he said. And he was recapping the night. And I was second to last one that he came to. And he said, Chael Sonnen has proved that he cannot go with the elite in the division. I remember thinking that was a very interesting comment. That was very strong. That's certainly not going to make me feel good. But it was a very strong comment, but it was an interesting look into Joe's mind. Joe, had he been in my shoes, would have come to the conclusion, I have proven I cannot go with the elite in the division. And I remember when Joe said it, I remember thinking, we're different people. That is not the conclusion that I'm coming to. That is not what I'm going to accept. I am going to learn from this. I am going to change certain things. I am going to work harder than ever, and I am going to come back. I'm just talking about my own career. I don't mean to shine myself up. But I fought 5 more world champions after that night, all world champions. And I beat 3 of them. So, no, I didn't prove that I couldn't do it. But that was the conclusion that was come to. And I think that Mike has come to a conclusion, I think many of us have, that Conor McGregor's confidence is shot. But you don't know that. Conor could have a completely different takeaway. Conor could be sitting on something we don't know about. You don't know how bad that leg was hurt before Conor went in there. You don't know if the version that's been put out or that Conor said, you don't know. Conor might be such a man that he already had a fracture, just didn't tell anybody. He might be that kind of a man. So maybe he's got all sorts of confidence knowing, hey, guy, I'm going to my next fight, I just won't have a broken leg. Shove it up everybody's ass. You don't know. You also don't know that Conor isn't fully convinced that he was winning that fight and then had this freak injury happen. I'm only sharing with you another side of the coin. Before we get to guessing, first off, we're going to lay out a strategy for Conor, to lay one out that is impossible, that we don't do within the sport. I don't know how helpful that is. But secondly, to attempt to this is one of the all-time greats. His mind does not work the way most people's minds work, which is why his results are different than most people's results are. Fine line between genius and insanity. I don't know where he sits. A lot of the champions are right on that fence, right? They just march to the beat of a different drum. We don't know that he doesn't have confidence. We don't know what he's doing in the gym. We don't know what he truly dealt with leading into that fight. We don't know if he has a very different opinion of how that fight was going. I think it's interesting. I'll give you one more simple example about that. But I had never seen an athlete break in fighting where he breaks. Mentally, he is broken and come back within the same night. I've seen it one time in my life. Never seen it before or since. It's Randy Couture in Randy Couture versus Pedro Hizo Part 1. Randy Couture broke. He quit. He was done. He conceded the fight and gave it to Pedro. In that same match, he came back and he won the fight. I had never seen it before. I have broken in matches, and I will tell you, you do not come back that night. And I don't just mean in that competition. You don't come back that night. You don't come back the next day. You don't come back the next week. It takes you months. It takes you months to rebuild and repair. Breaking mentally, it's a totally different thing than breaking physically or being beat. You get to a point of exhaustion, of damage, of frustrating, a combination of those two, and you stop. You accept, this is not my night. It's a very tough thing to go through. Very few people do. Very few people put themselves in positions or are willing to work hard enough to experience that. How'd that happen? The UFC, after that fight, set up the rematch and gave Pedro Hizo, at that time, the largest, most financially beautiful contract of anyone in the history of fighting. They thought in the rematch he was going to take out Randy based on what they saw the first time. They thought that Pedro did win the first fight, just lost the decision. Many people did. So they're going to rematch him. This is going to be their new champion. Exit stage left, the natural. Bring in the Pedro Rizzo era. And I will just tell you, as a teammate of Randy, I was in the locker room with him that night. I was in the locker room with him. Second time that he fought him. I was in practice with him every day. And Randy was as calm as could be when he re-signed. He didn't train anything and change anything in training. He didn't go into any kind of a panic mode. He didn't try to avoid the rematch with Pedro as opposed to welcome. He didn't do any of those things. None of the things that you would think a guy is going to do, because I know exactly what the UFC saw. I saw it too. Pedro's younger. History says Pedro should have won that night. Pedro has the answer. I get it. Pedro's going to win the rematch. Pedro's going to be champion. We all saw the same thing. But I heard something that you guys were not exposed to, which is Randy Couture simply saying, the reason I ran out of energy in Pedro Part 1 is I screwed up my warm-up. Now, Randy never told anybody this. Randy never made any excuses. I guarantee you guys don't know this story. But what Randy had shared with us in private is, man, I screwed up the warm-up. I got in there. I thought I was going on at such and such time. First off, I did a 40-minute warm-up. I should have done 20. But then I didn't go on. Something happened. I cooled back down, so I got back up and I did another 40 minutes. I worked out in the back for 80 minutes. I was tired when we got in there. It wasn't I got exhausted in the ring. It wasn't Pedro wore me out. I got worn out in the back before I ever walked out. I'm not going to do that again. That's all he said. It was very simple. And I remember thinking, that's ridiculous. And we got to the venue for the second one, and sure enough, he warmed up about 18 minutes. He went out there. He was absolutely full of energy. He never lost a single round, and he didn't even go the distance. He stopped the younger Pedro Rizzo. You guys have never heard that. A guy changed the performance in the same contest as against doing the same thing. He changed the performance. Beat a guy worse, beat him easier because he changed how much he warmed up. Yes, Randy knew that was what happened. He knew internally. He said it. Aljo would be another example for you. You only got to go back 4 weeks. Aljo was full of confidence going to the Jan fight. He was full of confidence because he knew in the first fight that wasn't him. He knew it wasn't him because he knew he botched the weight cut. He knew to fix that performance against the same guy to just fix the weight cut. Okay, is it an excuse or is it the truth? You won't know till it's after. It turned out it was the complete truth. That was not at all the same Aljo that showed up the first time. So I'm only sharing. You don't know what's going on in Conor's mind. You're electing from an outsider to do what Rogan did to me. Oh, he's done. He can't go with these guys. What are you talking about? Some guys, that's a totally different motivation. Some guys are real fighters. Some guys get up. Some guys don't stay down. Some guys find a way when finding a way is hard. And you got other guys that go out there and they find tomato cans and look tough in front of the world as a way of giving themselves some pride. I'm not saying that either guy is wrong. I'm saying this world has different kinds of guys. And I don't think any of you know what type of guy Conor McGregor is.